911 operators of Reddit, what call will you simply never forget? Not me, but my sister is a dispatcher. One time she received a call from a man who said he just killed his sister and his brother. She kept him on the phone for 5 or 6 minutes to make sure he didn't run before officers arrived. She got him to admit they had all been drinking and playing cards. Then they got into an argument when one of them accused the other of cheating. The other two went to bed, but this guy stayed up stewing. Apparently, he just couldn't let it go. He shot each of them in their beds while they slept, then called 911. I heard a partial recording of the call and she sounded calm as She told me she was screaming on the inside the entire time. Student Parademic here. Had a call being general broadcasted over radio when I was chilling in base with my mentor. We were on a 2-man car ambulance. Operator who was broadcasting said something along the lines of, female reportedly unconscious, police on scene, major trauma, CPR in progress, confirmed arrest by police on scene. My mentor looks at me. We're off in 30 minutes at the end of the night shift, but we go anyway. We're around the corner, make it there in no time. There's police everywhere, at least 7 squad cars. I'm nervous as hell and so is my mentor. As we approach the house, a man emerges, handcuffed by police. He looks content enough and smiles at us as we walk by. Police shout for us to hurry. We run over with equipment to front door and are met with one of the worst scenes I have ever witnessed and will always be there in my mind. There's a woman lying on the ground with the side of her head caved in, blood absolutely all over the place and brain matter scattered around the floor too. Police are doing CPR. We stop them when we see the patient has signs of pooling and rigor mortis. I'm literally sweating and on the verge of tears. This is not how I wanted my shift to end. Then we hear from behind us more police in the houses and the sounds of children. 2 kids are escorted out of a bedroom behind us with their eyes covered and one of them asks, "What's going on? Where's mommy?" My heart melted. I've never been exactly traumatized by a job, but those kids being shielded from what just happened to their mother will stick with me forever. I bring equipment back to the ambulance as my mentor starts doing the paperwork and we wait for someone to move the body. Social services arrive and take the kids, blissfully unaware of what just happened. Was off 3 hours late after all the paperwork and interviewing from police. Good job, but man has it left its mark on me. Older lady, I want to say maybe early 70s, calls in with a sort of polite urgency in her voice. Tells me she thinks she's having a stroke. Tells me she has her grandchild at the house with her. Asks me to call her daughter to come get the child. By the time she's done giving me the phone number, there's just a very slight slur in her speech. By the time EMS got there, probably no more than 5 minutes or so, I couldn't understand a thing she was saying. Fascinating, disturbing, and profoundly sad hearing someone stroke out on the phone as they're talking to you. Had someone call saying a man had been killed by a goat. Turns out goat is what they also call the machine that picks oranges off of trees. Miscommunication can be horrifying. I just googled orange goat to see what this machine looked like, and all the results were orange goats. Not entirely sure how I didn't see for that one coming. This actually happened a few days ago. I'm an ER tech, but one of our unit secretaries, someone who transfers calls and does other important tasks that keeps the place afloat, is an EMT in the next county over. I was waiting for a patient to return to their room, talking with her when she looks down at her phone. She tells me that she has a dispatch app or whatever for ambulances and fire trucks, and every fire hall in the county had just received a call about a possible decomposing body. Apparently the number called about a terrible smell coming from the property. Hazmat was called and everything, expecting a dead human body. Once they broke into the house, they found that it wasn't a dead human, but 38 dogs in the house. 11 of the dogs were dead and in varying states of decomposition. The place is still pretty much under wraps, but 16 more dogs were found in the shed yesterday. The 2 people who own the house has since been arrested and charged with 51 counts of animal cruelty. All of the animals left alive were taken to the Humane Society, where half the county has just about donated food or blankets. The whole thing is pretty messed up, but I now for sure respect the hell out of the EMTs and paramedics that walk through our doors every day. They really never know what they're going to see when they walk into a place. Apparently, a dog breeder filed a complaint in March about this specific couple because they bought 3 puppies from her but never finished paying for them. Reed is talking with local authorities, including the Humane Society, to try and discover if the puppies she sold to Roberts and Filler are still alive. It's not even the money. I need to know if they're in safe hands, Reed said. My puppies are like my kids. She doesn't know if the puppies she sold to these sick people are alive or dead. I can't imagine that feeling. I'll go with a lighter one, thank God. I once had an elderly woman complain about gang members tagging her shed. She also said she didn't want a black deputy. This is the South, mind you. The black deputy arrived and found that it wasn't spray paint, but that her shed was so dirty that slugs had eaten paths in the filth that created patterns. The mixed slug gang strikes again. A woman masturbating on the phone. The first time she called, she sounded normal at first, asked for an officer that never worked here. General conversation about this officer while she progressively got more extreme with her moaning. I eventually and gracefully ended the conversation. It was a wild time. I still remember her name and voice. The second and third time she called, I asked if it was her and she hung up right away. Why are you like this, Ms. Roberts? What's your endgame?
Why would you do that? We're in the end game now.
I was a dispatcher for a residential alarm company similar to ADT. I would call people when their alarm was tripped and ask them if they were okay. One day I received a signal from a residence from a glass break sensor on a window in the bathroom. When I called, the lady was laughing so hard she could barely give me her safety password. Turns out she was cleaning her bathroom, and when she bent over, she farted so hard and loud, it set off the sensor on the bathroom window. Well, I'll be damned. Not 911, but telenursing. People called me plenty when they should have been 911. Grandma calls me about her 16-year-old 40-week pregnant granddaughter. Hey, my grandbaby is pregnant and she just went to pee and said the cord's hanging out. Is that normal? No, not even a little bit. Okay, so what should I do? Try unplugging the cord and then plugging it back in and see if that works. I've been a 911 dispatcher for 11 years in a medium-sized center. Population around 180,000. We have more than our share of crazy calls, but there's only a few calls that have stuck with me. For me, the ones I can't get rid of aren't even that close to being the craziest or most brutal. 7 to 8 years ago, I took a 911 call from a man who came home to find his adult sister had been and beaten. The suspect had wrapped a telephone cord around her neck, then tried to push her through a window of the apartment. He was understandably very distraught. She was still alive and was able to talk to me. She had not been blindfolded, and I was certain I could get a description of the person who had done this to her. She answered all of my other questions, but absolutely refused to give me any info on the suspect. I later found out that the reason was self-preservation. The person who did it was the brother who called 911 for help. He was so believable it really messed with my head. I also felt horrible that I'd continued pressing her for info with the person who hurt her was right there, and that I could potentially put her in more danger without even realizing it. I have a few. I took a call from a man whose 1-year-old daughter fell in the pool while unattended. At the time of the call, she was not breathing, unresponsive, and had no pulse. My partner dispatched out fire and EMS while I was on the phone. Got the child's mother to start CPR. Fortunately, she was certified and didn't require very much instruction at all, just had to tell her to count her compressions out loud so I could keep up. Before first responders arrived, the baby starts breathing again. I believe she sustained some brain injury, but nothing life-threatening. Had to go take a walk around the block after that one. Please, 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 if you aren't CPR certified, get certified. It may very well have been the difference between that child living and that child dying. On a lighter note, I also had a guy call in claiming he was having a heart attack. None of the info I got from this guy indicated that he was even remotely at risk for one. Mid-20s male, average weight, no history of heart problems or any other medical history for that matter. Turns out he had smoked some particularly strong pot about 30 minutes prior to calling. Absolutely nothing wrong with him other than he was stone stupid. We got a pretty good laugh out of that one. I also took a call from a kid who was about 10 years old who thought it would be funny to prank call 911. He started off by saying there was a fire. I could hear him giggling in the background, followed that up with meowing at me over the phone. Managed to get a good location off the call and got his address. Read the address to him and asked if that's where he lives. Click. Alright, now gotcha, you little Schreiber. Had a deputy go out to the house, as is our policy, and he explained the situation to the parents. Deputy told me later the kid got the ass chewing of a lifetime. Super gratifying. A young man, 23 years old, called me and told me he was going to commit suicide. He was my first call on my shift that day, very early in the morning. He planned to set his car on fire with himself inside. He was upset and crying, but he apologized to me. He said he was sorry. I picked up the phone and he was sorry for for how this is going to affect me. He hung up on me, and the second time I was speaking to him, I could hear liquid splashing in the background. He ended up hanging up again, and I never got back to him. He did end up setting the car on fire, and it was fully engulfed by the time anyone got there. I'll never forget his name. I'll never forget his voice. I simply hope I showed him kindness and compassion in his last moments. This one still bothers me because it's so fresh and our community is hurting from it as well. Took a call from a hysterical woman advising me of a rollover crash that happened near her house. She lives on top of a blind hill that people like to jump, like catching that butterfly feeling in your stomach, although you can actually get air in the right vehicle. She tells me that a girl is laying on the ground about 30 feet or so from the vehicle. When asked if the girl is alive, she says, "Oh yes, honey, she's wiggling around on the ground. My daughter is a nurse. She's checking on her now." Awesome, we hardly ever are lucky enough to have a trained professional on the scene before a med unit can get there. But then she tells me her daughter is starting CPR. To be honest, that didn't surprise me. My car was getting hysterical again and we already had responders on the way. So I started asking more questions about the scene. Her daughter breaks CPR to get on the phone with me, tells me she can do compressions only, that the girl's jaw is completely gone. A bit stunned, fairly, I tell her to continue compressions. But rather than getting put back on with the original caller, I hear the scared voice of a teenage girl, the driver. Is my friend going to be okay? I can't find anything to say for a moment. Finally, after what seemed to be too long, I say, "They're doing CPR, dear, and we have help on the way. Are you and the other passenger okay?" "We're fine, just please tell me she's gonna be okay." The girl on the ground was confirmed dead on arrival. She had been laying down in the back seat without her seatbelt on because she had a headache. She was 15. Answered to the sounds of a couple of women absolutely screaming and wailing. I'm sure anyone that's done the job long enough knows the type of scream I mean. That blood-curdling scream of someone in genuine anguish. Knew something was up and got police and ambulance on the way. Trying to get them on the phone to give details, and a boy of no more than 5 years old comes on the phone and says, "My daddy is swinging from the roof and his eyes are open and staring." A woman complaining of spiders in her vagina. In college, I worked as an EMT in a major city. Not the craziest call I ever had, but one of the wackiest call outs we ever got was to respond to a woman complaining of spiders in her vagina. I'll never forget pulling up to this major intersection where, sure enough, there's this old lady lying on the sidewalk with her pants off and legs spread up in the air. Turns out it was this transient lady in her 70s who had been having some wild hallucinations. We still had to check for spiders. On my second full-time shift, it was about 11 p.m. on a Thursday. We get a call from a female, screaming, just screaming. That's all we heard before we lost connection. Second 911 call from a neighbor across the street. I think I just heard a gunshot and now our neighbor is screaming, yelling for help. I think something terrible happened. While my partner was getting more info from caller number 2, 911 rings again. It's the original caller. She's still screaming, but is trying to speak, even though I can't understand anything she's saying. After a couple very stern verbal slaps of, "Ma'am, I need you to calm down and tell me what is going on," she's finally able to tell me that she thinks her husband just killed himself. She went on to explain that they were watching a TV show together. Everything seemed normal when he got up and said that he would be right back. Wife heard the back deck door open and close and then heard a gunshot. She ran to the door and saw his feet and legs lying down on the deck. She called initially but was unable to control herself and accidentally hung up. She was still a complete disaster when I talked to her, but I was able to get the basics out of what happened and relay the info to responding officers and fire. She kept telling me that she needed to go outside and help him. Do I need to go out there? Do you need me to go out there? I don't want to see him. I can't see him. My only job at that point was to try and keep her calm and keep her from getting up from the corner of the kitchen floor where she had collapsed until police arrived and secured the weapon. They had been married 27 years, 2 kids, 3 grandkids, lived a happy life together. She had no indication that anything was wrong. Her husband got up from the couch, walked out onto the back porch, and blew his head off with a black powder pistol. I don't remember the name, but I will never be able to forget her screams. Well, my buddy is a fireman and dispatch had just alerted them of a man having chest pains. They get to the guy's house and as soon as they open the door, the dude's dog runs outside. The dude shouts, "You let my dog out! Go get my dog, please!" So my buddy immediately starts chasing the dog. He catches the dog, comes back in the house, and when he walks in the house, he sees that the man having, and I quote, chest pains had actually shot a hole in his chest while cleaning his gun. Old dude shoots himself in the chest, tells 911 it's chest pains, and when help arrives, he makes them go chase his dog down before tending to his own life-threatening wounds. Biggest WTF of my buddy's career. I've left the job now for Pastor's new butt story time. A woman of 90 years old calls up and said she's having a spot of trouble. She's struggling to work the phone and tells me she's basically had a leg ulcer which has popped and that she's on blood thinners, so there's a lot of blood coming out. I get an ambulance out immediately to her, but midway through the call it goes silent and I hear a big old thud on the floor. After this, I try my best to basically shout down the phone after her to get her attention. All I can hear is very heavy breathing, but no reply. This continues for a couple minutes before I hear banging on the other end of the line and a voice faintly shouting the lady's name. I keep trying to rouse her myself, but I am unsuccessful. I hear the windows break and a couple of voices approaching. They reach her and thankfully I hear her very faint voice respond. Normally we don't find out what happens, but in this case I actually received a letter and chocolates from the lady who sent it in and said that she could hear me the whole time and felt reassured that help was coming, but she didn't have the strength to reply. I worked for a dispatch company very similar to Life4. An older lady in her 90s thought someone was intruding on her property and called the cops. She had severe dementia though and forgot she had called the cops, so when they rang the door she thought they were the intruders. So she hit her wrist button to get in contact with us. Then she got out her gun. I then called the police while also talking to her, and literally on the recording you could hear her taking shots at the police officers on scene. While they freaked out, while I got my supervisor ASAP tried to talk her down. The police and I eventually got her to calm down and stop firing, but apparently she had missed a cop by just 6 inches. Family had to get involved and she ended up moving into a nursing home shortly after. Dementia sucks. 112 dispatcher, among other things. My job is actually a fireman, but due to the structure of the fire department where I live, we are also taking calls. Anyway, I got a call from a lady who wanted assistance because she fell on the floor, lived alone, and had trouble standing up. Pretty common, so I sent a crew out there. They come back and they tell me she was kind of disappointed. Huh? This call kept happening for the next few days till we understood what was going on. She had a crush on one of my colleagues and she just wanted him to visit her. When she finally put together when his shift was working, they only had her calls ever since. The one that always sticks with me was the time I had to tell a father how to cut his 15-year-old son down after he had hung himself. He was actively reciting reasons why he may have been a bad parent while doing it. I'll remember that until the day I die.